couple months ago, there was a lot of talk about divorce in the news. It's because of some big celebrity breakup, but I honestly can't even remember who it was because the media coverage at the time was so respectful and restrained. Or maybe in a parallel dimension. Anyway, this got me thinking about divorces, and in particular this line from the How I Met Your Mother series finale.
Guys, it's okay. This isn't a failed marriage. It's a very successful marriage that happened to only last 3 years.
Now, at the time, I thought this sentiment was preposterous. I didn't absolutely hate the ending, like a lot of people did, but I really thought this line was based on some terribly flawed logic. But looking back at it now with a much cooler head, I actually understand the point it was trying to make. It's just an extension of the themes the finale is set on portraying, and those are themes the series as a whole has always flirted with. And it's why the line actually makes a lot of sense, both thematically and for the characters involved. But before we can delve into that, we have to cover the elephant in the room. A lot of people hated the finale. I mean hated it. But for the most part, I think this is because it doesn't conform to how you would expect a sitcom to end. There's no one big happy ending where everyone is all together again. There's no Ross chasing after Rachel and finally getting her. Not only that, but people were really peeved off that in a series called How I Met Your Mother, Ted doesn't actually finish the series with the mother. Instead, she dies, and he eventually falls back in love with Robin. In short, their take on the finale was that it was telling them that Ted had always been in love with Robin, and the mother had just been some consolation prize while she was otherwise occupied. But not only is that a very simplistic interpretation of the episode, it actually flies in the face of what the series had been about from the beginning. It's what made How I Met Your Mother such an enduring show. Even when the weekly episodes drifted in later seasons, the overarching character arc stood out far beyond what many sitcoms before or since have provided. For every episode where Barney dances on the roof of a car singing about suits, there are episodes that deal with far more real situations than anything we typically expect from a sitcom. How could anyone forget the devastating emotional gut punch that was the death of Marshall's dad? Not only was this heart-wrenching, it had actually been foreshadowed almost a whole season prior, when a flash forward to a Thanksgiving table showed him absent. Another great example of this show being unafraid to get more serious with its audience is when Ted is left at the altar by Stella. Now, in itself, this is something that quite a few shows have done, but the way it's handled is different. See, Ted doesn't do anything wrong. He doesn't cheat on the bride or say Rachel at the altar. No, Stella leaves simply because Ted isn't the one who's meant to be with her. The show makes this clear by literally having Ted realize and narrate that she left simply because that whole season's arc wasn't actually his story. It was hers. It was a story about how she reconnected with her true love by being in a relationship that let her love again. In a sense, if she hadn't fallen in love with Ted, then she never would have been able to fall back in love with her ex either. So it wasn't that she didn't love Ted. In the moment when they were together, she did. But the lesson the show continuously puts forward is that life happens, and as a result, people change with it. And this is seen in the seasons following Ted's abandonment at the altar. The event scars him so much that he effectively becomes as callous and whimsical in his relationships as Barney had been in the first season of the show. Meanwhile, Barney reconnecting with his father leads him to want the love that Ted was searching for at the start of the show. They switched roles completely. Their characters evolved to reflect the major events that shaped their lives. And as we move forward through our own birthdays and major life events, this same exact thing happens to us. Life changes, and we change with it. This is something we rarely see in sitcoms. I love Friends, but it's fair to say that you can tune into that show week in, week out, and Chandler will always be sarcastic and awkward, Monica neurotic and controlling, Joey hungry and a bit dumb, or Phoebe totally frickin' awesome. The characters' circumstances change, whether that's their jobs or their relationships, but they never really evolve themselves. And that's a safe kind of week-to-week storytelling that I think a lot of people expected out of the How I Met Your Mother finale. So imagine their shock when the finale starts jumping forward through time, and as it does, we see that our characters are slowly drifting apart. They don't all stay together like the group they were through their late 20s and early 30s. And all this culminates in Robin's teary-eyed speech at the end of part 1 of the episode.
The 5 of us hanging out at McLaren's, being young and stupid. It's just not one of those things.
It sucks. But like many of the high points of the show before it, this moment is real. As we grow older, many of us are going to experience a similar drifting apart. The people we loved in our 20s and 30s begin to fall away. Maybe not all at once, and maybe not all of them, but they do. Whether it's because of kids, moves to different cities or countries, new jobs, or, yeah, even sickness. It's never going to be how it was. And so we get back to that quote about divorce from the beginning of the episode.
It's a very successful marriage that happened to only last 3 years.
People, myself included, often leverage the complaint that this did little justice to the 3 seasons prior that had set up the Barney and Robin relationship. And while the instant time jump is a bit jarring, I now have to disagree. You see, the meaning of this quote is all the more powerful because it also applies to what Ted is going through later on after the mother dies. The divorce happens because, yet again, life gets in the way. All of a sudden, Robin is constantly globetrotting. She's never around, and this fundamentally changes the dynamic of her and Barney's relationship. So they break it off. But in the moments when they were together, they really were deeply in love, and their marriage really was great. The divorce is just an end to that, but it doesn't change the fact that they did love each other for those 3 years. They had a successful relationship, but life meant it had to come to an end. And that's an exact reflection of what happens to Ted later on. He was deeply in love with his wife, so much so that he canceled a move to Chicago for a new job the very day after meeting her. So yeah, in the end, he's with Robin, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he had a successful marriage for years. But life intervened again. His wife passed away, and 6 long years later, he's finally able to move on. It doesn't lessen how much he loved his wife. He's just at a different moment in time. And in the end, that's what How I Met Your Mother was always about. It could be dumb and silly or real and emotional, but in the end, the entire show is based on the premise of a dad telling a story to his kids. A story about the small and big moments in his life that led him to where he is now. That's what the show is all about. Special moments. Snapshots of our lifetimes that we'll always remember. The stories we'll tell our kids. I mean, the opening credits are literally snapshots of the characters at the bar. As if it could be any more obvious. And so no matter what life throws at us, no matter who we end up with, and no matter how far we can eventually drift apart from each other, those snapshots capture a moment when our laughs, tears, and loves will always be real. What we felt in those moments will always remain unchanged, even if we do not. How I Met Your Mother's finale had the guts to take this concept to its ultimate conclusion. It was a story about moments in time. How the characters felt while they were experiencing them, and how they changed afterwards. Because as much as we can be afraid of it when it happens, as much as it can piss us off when we see it on TV, that's what life has always been about. Change.